Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first Fox Forum. This is going to be a monthly webcast hosted by me, Jack Pudney, where I'm joined by guests and solution experts from across EverFox and partners, possibly, to talk about things that are going on in the cyber industry, high-level stuff. Today, I'm joined by the wonderful Flash, and we're going to be talking about collaborative working environments and some lessons that we've got from Ukraine. So before we start, Flash, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Happy to. So Flash, I'm formerly Dave Flanagan. I'm a senior principal solutions architect. What that really means is that the focus of what I do is to listen to customers, understand what outcomes they're after, and then understand and explain to them where our technology fits in, where our solutions can help them, and indeed guide them where they may not. In terms of background, I've been with EverFox for just over 7 years now. Prior to that, I worked in a large SI for 20 years. That was exclusively in defence and national security. During that time, my focus was delivering computers, IT systems to frontline services. Associated with that was the interoperability and collaborative work that goes between the various classifications, different partner nations, all the gateways and technology that's needed to deliver those. Before that, I worked in a retail organisation for a few years, delivering voice and data networks for them. And then a long time ago, I was briefly in the Royal Air Force. What that means is that I spent over 35 years working in communications, answer communications, collaboration, interoperability environments. And as a trained enterprise architect, as I said a moment ago, I'm able to bring that experience and that context to shaping the way in which our solutions can work with customers.
Fantastic stuff. So a bit of a techie.
Absolutely.
All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about collaborative working, specifically about Ukraine, and probably broaden the scope a little bit as we go in the conversation. But I just want to start by framing it a little bit. This is not going to be a conversation around the management of collaborative working environments or mission partner environments. We're going to be focused on real-world applications and try and glean some lessons from some stuff that's been going on in the world. So I kind of want to start with quite a broad one, frame it a little bit. Ukraine is obviously an extreme real-world use case test environment of a lot of these collaborative working environments. What have we seen recently? How's it been used? How have they been used? Who's been using it? What have been the outcomes? Positive, negative, difficulties? I know it's very broad, but tell me what you know.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. So in order to put a bit of constraint around that context, what is a collaborative working environment? If we take the very, very simple view that is the way in which we allow a disparate community of individuals who all have a common goal in some way, shape or form to work together. The things that we have seen in Ukraine, and we've seen this by engaging through various organisations who have worked in the field, various organisations who've led the development of some of the programmes in that space. For Ukraine specifically, interoperability and collaboration is very much a whole of society thing. So what we're seeing is the extreme edge of the challenge of collaborative working environments and interoperability. How do I let everybody from my military and my intelligence community all the way down to the citizen actually be part of that community and work together in terms of delivering an outcome?
How are the citizens getting involved with a collaborative working environment?
So the sorts of things that they get involved in, and depending on the sorts of news channels you watch and the sorts of background context you look at, it is everything from using their cell phones as active sensors. So here's a video of something of interest. I can then share that with people who would be able to then make decisions based on what it is they're seeing. But also using my cell phone to arrange for evacuations, to arrange for alerts, to provide information out to the citizen to say, what is the state of the battle, how things are going, what sort of areas do they need to worry about.
So it's two-way?
Absolutely two-way.
How are citizens uploading that data or transferring that data to?
And it's as simple as posting a video to YouTube.
Right, okay.
And if you imagine that from a Ukrainian perspective, they were forced into a position with the invasion where the way in which they operate is very much public cloud based. So their collaborative environment is in the public cloud. It is obviously secured in that environment. It is the weaving together of a whole bunch of different applications and differing capabilities to achieve different effects. That ecosystem, and you'll hear names like the Delta program and Griselda and things like that. There are many, many applications that are specific to type, specific to task, that are then meshed together in that environment to allow that two-way flow of information.
Yeah.
So as I say, as a citizen, I can take a video, I can upload it to a portal, that will then move through the targeting cycle and the intelligence cycle in the Ukrainian military.
Yeah, okay. And so obviously Ukraine is quite an intense example. But what's it exposed that peacetime planning didn't? Why has that become?
So there are two aspects of that that are fascinating. One is, and this has to be treated with appropriate caution, is that before the invasion, people were comfortable with data centers, comms paths, and their computers in a room somewhere. In an active engagement of this nature, they are some of the first things that got targeted and therefore taken away. So in that respect, the traditional way of running systems, running defense IT, simply broke. However, what was then discovered and was used to hugely great effect is the migration of that capability into the public cloud and the ability to use that in a different way. One of the things that has proven to be very, very interesting is that the nature of the conflict is such that the public cloud is still there and available. It is under attack, but it's still there and available. The comms network, Starlink, is still there, still available. Again, potentially under attack, but it's still available. And that is an interesting aspect of what is going on in Eastern Europe at the minute.
And how about, you mentioned before it's been used for evacuations and real world applications that have been saving lives rather than potentially
absolutely that
doing damage.
So there's a module within the suite of applications that allows citizens to report their location so that they can then be, we can arrange effectively an evacuation mechanism for them, send in troops, guide them out, whatever it is that's required.
And have their Ukraine's allies supported them with this, or have they been standing up their own environments? Has NATO been involved? Has Poland, US, UK?
So that's an area about which I have to be really, really cautious about what I say. And the reason I have to be cautious is because there are things that we simply don't know. There are things that we shouldn't know, and I would be, as I say, cautious about trying to assert something about which I don't have an authoritative view. But what is true is that Microsoft, as an example, have leaned in heavily to help the Ukrainian government, both before the invasion, during and after the invasion. And there have been many, many other organisations that have leaned in to help with Ukraine. And it is also true that a lot of that has been done under the auspices of NATO and interoperability.
So we can't talk about who might be helping or if people are, other than organisations, but presumably the nations and the groups that have been viewing the Ukraine crisis and have been taking lessons from it.
Absolutely, that is definitely true.
So what have NATO and the UK and the US learned from that? What are we seeing that them do with their own collaborative working environments or perhaps mission partner environments?
So, and I think that's one of the most fascinating areas, is that this is a real world situation where the historical view of a collaborative working environment between two military organisations, so the UK and the US working together, the UK and French working together, etc., all of those sorts of things. With the UK Defence Review that happened last year, one of the phrases that turns up in there quite a lot is whole of society. And as I mentioned earlier on, one of the things that I think people are learning very, very clearly from the Ukrainian conflict in terms of collaborative working environment is that you do need to extend the reach of the people with whom you are going to collaborate and interoperate. So civilian military interoperability has proven to be extremely important.
So you mean extend basically the size of the collaborative working environment, or
Indeed.
how many users can access it, or are we talking just how many people can feed into the machine that is the collaborative working environment?
It's very much the scope of the collaborative working environment. So who are the types of people who will be in there, as well as the number of people.
Yeah.
So
that's touching on how Ukraine have utilised their civilians to access it and feed into it, rather than traditional
as well as. Yes. So again, if you think in terms of as a traditional collaborative working environment, and think in terms of Five Eyes, then you may have an intelligence sharing environment.
Yeah.
And therefore you've got lots of people in very dark rooms with some very exquisite capability, all sharing their key information with each other, which is an essential part of the mission. What we've seen in Ukraine is that whilst all of that is true, then the ability to reach further, the importance of what would be termed open source intelligence as part of your collaborative working environment and interoperability has really come to the fore.
Okay. I want to pull back a little from Ukraine. Obviously, we still want to utilise the lessons we've learned from Ukraine. But I want to talk about a more, I don't know how to describe it. Boring topic? Maybe not boring. Technical topic. Let's get some sayings out there. Let's get some statements and tell me if they're true or false. So I'd like you to explain to me the differences between collaborative working environments, federated mission networks, and mission partner environments.
Absolutely. So a collaborative working environment, from my perspective, is best treated as a generic term.
Yeah.
And I often say, right, okay, get the dictionary out. It's about collaboration, working in an environment.
Yeah.
So how do I create an environment that allows all of the people that are the community of interest for that to come into that space, to share their information, their knowledge, their working, etc. So it's a very, in that respect, it's a very generic term, collaborative working environment. When we then start to look at Federated Mission Network, so NATO Federated Mission Network, and the US mission partner environment, what you're then looking at is a specific instance of a category of collaborative working environment.
Okay.
And in those cases, what you're drawing on is the community of users who are interested. So, for example, with NATO FMN, you've got the 32 nations, plus the Allied Partnership for Peace and Coalitions of the Willing and all those sorts of things. With MPE, you find that things are often focused on the COCOMs. So CENTCOM will have an MPE that looks at a particular environment, maybe Indo-PACOM or something like that would be another focus from an MPE. So CWEs as a generic thing, and anybody can have one, and most people work one. You work in teams, it's a collaborative working environment. SharePoint is a collaborative working environment. FMN and MPE start to put some focus around why you're doing that collaboration and who's coming to play.
And is that it? It's just different people coming into play, or nations coming into play. The actual network and setup and all that sort of stuff is the same for the most part between an MPE and a federated mission network.
Yeah, they're very, very similar. What you find is that as you move into government and defence and intelligence, and indeed from a Ukrainian point of view, there are other factors that then start to influence the way in which your CWE is set up. And typically, those are things like government classifications. Is my information secret, unclassed, top secret, some other classification because of all the different partners I'm working with?
Yeah.
How do I mark that information from a releasability point of view? So do I have something that is UKIs, I process it to make it releasable to that collaborative working environment. So when you move out of commercial and into more defence and government related, you start to see these additional controls come in. And very much maybe a talk for a future topic, data-centric security.
Well, I did want to touch on that.
Right, excellent.
If you don't mind. How does data-centric security come into play with these FMNs and MPEs? And I know it's quite a broad topic, and it's definitely one for another day as well. But if you could kind of just explain a little bit about what data-centric security actually is.
Absolutely. So back when I was young and started out on this journey.
So last year.
Yeah, I thank you, very kind. So one of the things that was true in the past, and people will have heard phrases like network-centric security,
Yeah.
and what that effectively means is that the way in which people would stand up a collaborative working environment, and that there are many, many acronyms associated with these, is that the entire infrastructure, the computer, the network, the data, the applications, would be focused on that collaborative community. So you would have a Five Eyes working environment with all of the tin and string that goes with it. You'd have an 83 Eyes with all the tin and string that goes with it. And over years, they proliferated, and there were many. And it was recognized that that has become not only unsustainable in terms of the cost of running so many different infrastructures and so many different networks, it in and of itself, it hampers interoperability. Because something that was built 30 years ago and something that's built 5 years ago and something that's built today, trying to get them to interoperate can be challenging. So one of the key goals of MPE and FMN today is to allow for the creation of effectively a single infrastructure, so a single set of networks, a single set of servers and applications, etc. And instead of having a coarse-grained control that says the entire network is RHEL 5 Eyes, you start to put that control into the individual bits of data. So I have a Word document that is RHEL 5 Eyes, I have a Word document that is UK Eyes. As a user coming into that environment, I assert my identity, I put in a username, password, certificate, tokens and things. Associated with that identity is what nationality am I? Oops, that was the microphone. Associated with that identity is what nationality am I, what clearances do I have, what communities of interest am I part of. Those attributes are then mapped against the data label attributes to say what am I allowed to see.
And that's for still around data-centric security.
That's very much data-centric security.
So are NATO and UK and the US and whoever, are they protecting data now rather than the network? Is that what data-centric security is doing in these environments?
So what we're getting is an increased flexibility and benefit from protecting the data and the network.
Okay.
And
could we say that Ukraine has sped up this the process of, would it be even safe to assume that they use data-centric security in Ukraine?
So
without giving too much away.
No. This is again testing the limits of what I can speak to authoritatively. My assertion today, my understanding today, is that the way in which Ukraine is working, the way in which the Delta program is working, is probably not a good example of a data-centric security environment.
Right, okay.
I think it could potentially in the future, as it becomes more interoperable and they lift up the security and strength of mechanism, it could very much become an enclave that is a DCS enclave.
So slightly different use case probably.
Correct. Yeah.
And what would be, if we take the civilian use case we spoke about in Ukraine, which possibly doesn't use it, what would be an alternative in an MPE or an FMN where we do see it?
So in that particular case, and again, staring into the crystal ball, speculating slightly, then
fine.
That data feed that comes in from the civilian, as it transits into the MPE or transits into the collaborative working environment, that video, the upload of the video, attracts a tag, a security label, so that people know where it came from,
right?
How much they can trust it.
And that would be the same in an FMN or a...
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, you've also mentioned the word interoperability a few times. It's treated as a bit of a technical problem for the most part. Is that actually true? Do you think that's...
So, yes. So the reason I say it that way is that, again, my experience, interoperability is enabled by technical measures. Being able to have a set of technical measures that are appropriate, achievable and affordable is driven by something that is less technical around the policy and the sorts of understanding of how that interoperability is going to be achieved.
Okay.
So, for example, if I have a large data set that is very poorly defined and I want to share it from an interoperability point of view with other people, then if they want to secure the flow of that data and I can't tell them what's in it, that makes interoperability difficult. Whereas if I have a well-defined data set with a very, very clear schema, very, very clear definitions, it is much easier to secure that because people know what's coming, they know what shape it is.
Okay.
So interoperability is very much technical controls, but influenced by other areas in terms of how people use some of the technology.
And where are we seeing it fail in Ukraine at the minute, do you think? Or maybe if we can't talk about Ukraine, we could talk about NATO or the US.
And I'm always cautious about saying where things are failing.
Okay, room for improvement.
Room for improvement. Perfect phrase. Perfect phrase. NATO has a well-earned reputation for the careful crafting of standards. So that is very much the case within NATO. You can spend many, many weeks, months, years crafting such a standard. The room for improvement is that whilst the outcome is good, having a standard, the time taken to get there is far too long. In the modern world of collaborative working environments, the modern world of MPE, the modern world for FMN requires and demands faster, more flexible change, but within a standards framework.
And that's the sad reality that conflicts often speed up the...
Absolutely true.
So who's doing it right? I mean, interoperability, obviously we can, if we stay away from Ukraine in this example, are there certain parts of the US government, the UK government, parts of NATO that are getting this right and doing it quickly?
So, yes, there are. And again, without wishing to go into specific details about specific customers, where we see typically a commercial driver to do things more quickly, then we see collaborative working environments that can be stood up very, very quickly, very, very flexibly, because there is either an operational imperative or a commercial imperative. It saves people money, and that is done. I think it is also probably quite true that they could all be done faster and could all be done better. There's plenty of room for improvement in terms of collaborative working environments.
They're not failing. There's room for improvement.
Absolutely, yes.
And do we see them converging over time? I guess I'm a little bit stuck on FMNs and MPEs, and they're going to clash, right? At some point, when the US government has to connect to uses the NATO network, or are they just interchangeable?
So, in order for them to succeed, interoperability is key. And if you look at MPE, then MPE has some very, very clear, so within the COCOMs, so EUCOM, their focus is NATO. So that is the coming together point for MPE and FMN. Of course, there are many nations that are aligned with the US and part of NATO. So everywhere where we have touch points, there is the need to achieve that collaborative interoperability, and where relevant, stand up those working environments. And bear in mind, some of these working environments have existed for many decades. Yeah.
So, I mean, if our listeners couldn't tell, we're both from the UK.
Indeed.
How do you see the UK adopting to this new world of MPEs and FMNs?
And I'm bound to say this, being from the UK.
Brilliantly.
Well, yes. Excuse me. So one of the most successful of recent months, years, experiments, I suppose you call it, exercises in terms of interoperability and collaborative working environments, the UK was actually the lead, working very, very closely with a number of other partner nations, Canadians particularly. But there is very, very good work being done in the UK from a number of different companies, as well as those mod organisations, etc.
Is that just a need to I don't want to say there's a European need to collaborate with different nations just because you have different networks that possibly you don't see as much in the US, or is it just as prevalent in the US, the sort of the need to collaborate with allies and the willingness to do it quickly and nimbly?
So, if you asked me that 6 months ago, I'd have said yes. There's the prevalence across the world. Definitely, that's true.
Lots changed in 6 months.
Well, lots has changed.
Leave it there.
Yes, but taking that experiment, taking that exercise particularly, that was global interoperability. So it was very much a case of those typical Five Eyes NATO nations, the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, etc., but working with many other partners across the world. It was a truly fantastic scope of event that was supported there, and that has helped to set the pattern for the next 1 to 2 years at least of collaborative working environment in the context of mission partner environments, and to a degree FMN as well.
Yeah, okay. And I almost don't want to bring this up because I think it could be its own topic as well, and a rabbit hole that we could get stuck in and lost in for a very long time. But I'm going to throw a buzzword at you.
Okay.
Zero trust.
Ah, yes, yes. Well, interestingly, Zero Trust now encompasses data-centric security, but it brings those together in the context of both the identity, the way in which you don't implicitly trust but verify at each step.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody describe that in the past few days in a really interesting way, in that if you have a kitchen, in the old days you used to be able to come into the kitchen and just once you got through the door you could use any element of that kitchen, because this was a chap who was trying to explain Zero Trust and data-centric security to his grandma.
Right, okay.
And she was trying to, what is this madness? And he said, with a Zero Trust data-centric secure environment, you have to prove that you're Fred to get into the kitchen. You then have to prove that you're Fred again to get into the cupboard with the ingredients, to get the pots and pans.
Oh, sounds long.
And this is why machine enablement is so important, because all of that, whilst it needs to happen, needs to be happening at machine speeds, not human speeds.
So data-centric security is allowing you to do that quickly?
Yes. Data-centric security, so does all of the data have an appropriate tag, label, etc.? Is my identity correctly enabled and correctly managed as a set of attributes that can then be tested by a policy engine against that data? And
there's an important distinction that data-centric security and Zero Trust, or correct me if I'm wrong here, cannot replace the network.
Correct. And
that will forever be an important part of...
So this is where I get into lots of trouble and say, yes, absolutely. There have been folk in the past who, and it's not just Zero Trust and data-centric security, when a new shiny toy comes out, they either choose to or, they choose to throw away all their old toys. With security, and particularly Zero Trust and data-centric security, I think all of those people, John Kindervag, for example, who was, some would say, was the godfather of Zero Trust as a way forward, was very clear that it's not a replacement, it's an augmentation.
Yeah.
Yes. And you shouldn't throw away good security practice just because you got some new additional security practice.
And the definition of Zero Trust is thrown about quite a lot, and it can be a little bit loose, fast and loose, I think, from different players. Does that affect how collaborative working environments are set up and data-centric security within those collaborative working environments are set up between different nations? Or is there a pretty...
Yeah, no, it certainly does. And there are many. There are multiple different interpretations of what Zero Trust means. So, for example, if I go and talk to one company, their perception on Zero Trust is that you would start to segment, start to break your network up into small parts, and then ultimately micro-segment, so that each data interaction, so as a subject, I want to read that Word document. each one of those will be a controlled segment, a controlled and authenticated and authorized exchange of information. Some of the people are focused very, very much more on the auditing associated with Zero Trust.
Okay.
Some people obviously are very much focused on the labeling that's associated with that and the controls. All of these things are true. NIST has done some excellent work with NIST 800-207 to lay down the basic architecture of what a Zero Trust journey should look like. But then they did a follow-up piece of work, I think it was middle of last year. I can't remember the actual SP number off the top of my head at the minute, it's like 1835. And that ran through with 24 different vendors, 19 different scenarios of configuring a Zero Trust environment. So in any heterogeneous, yeah, a lot. And what was true was none of them were perfect.
Yeah.
However, you can go and then find Microsoft, and they ran a program, and you can find it on the internet, Flank Speed. And with the US CISA view of Zero Trust and data-centric security, they were very highly compliant with all of it.
Okay.
Very, very successful for the US Navy.
So I want to bring it back to Ukraine. We're not quite wrapping up, but we'll be shortly. If we bring all of that together, we've got our FMNs, we've got our MPEs, and then interoperability, Zero Trust, and data security. Have they been applied? What are the lessons from Ukraine? Have they been applied for not for Ukraine, but for the UK, NATO, US? Has it sped up application and usage of collaborative working environments, or what's the key takeaway?
So I would say the key takeaway, and bear in mind this is my humble opinion.
Yeah, very humble.
Very humble, is that there is a huge amount to learn about what the scope of collaborative working environments needs to be for modern, well, I hate to say it, warfare.
What do you mean scope? Just like new applications?
So new applications and new players, new actors. I think one can draw a distinction between a shooting war in Eastern Europe and the continuous grey zone hybrid war that we're all fighting all the time, whether it's against transnational terrorists or kids in their bedrooms. We are constantly on the front line of a battle, and that is, in my humble opinion, a key part of the increase in the scope of what needs to be true, what needs to be visible, if you're actually going to have a collaborative working environment that includes all the relevant stakeholders and deter your adversary effectively. If you don't have that visibility across the widest possible scope of all of the attack surface that you're under, then it's very, very hard to win.
And it's crucial to do that with allies, right? I mean, that's the whole point of a collaborative working environment.
It is. It's doing it with the allies in terms of the nations. It's doing it with the people who are just allied with your goals, i.e. the populations of your nations.
Yeah.
Don't forget blue light organisations, the civil authorities. Everybody's got a part to play.
And the crucial detail being with data-centric security, it's more accessible.
Absolutely.
To connect to MPEs and FMNs.
Yes. And this is it. As you start to take that desire of how do I collaborate and how do I interoperate with that broadest possible spectrum of folk, then the technology that underpins that, like data-centric security and Zero Trust, is the enabler, along with all of the smart computers and networks and stuff.
So
joins it all together.
So you expect the usage to only continue to grow?
Absolutely, yes.
Both because of this grey zone conflict and just the geopolitics.
Yes, in every aspect. Whether you've gone to war or just find yourself in a fight, nobody does it alone anymore.
Yeah.
Everything's a coalition.
Love that. Right, I think we're probably about time to wrap up. I'll leave you with an open-ended one. Anything else to add?
So how long have we got?
About this topic.
About this topic.
Let's keep
Yes.
the guardrails.
So I would say that if you take nothing away from this conversation apart from this next piece, we set the topic around collaborative working environments. We used Ukraine as an example of the sorts of influence that you're getting. But as you can see from the conversation, we've talked far and wide about many different things. The key takeaway from my perspective is that collaborative working environments, particularly in a defence context, it is, and I've said it before in our conversation, it is the scope of that CWE, the number of different stakeholders, the reach that you need to have in order to be successful, I think is the thing that is changing most and fastest. Now, whether that's because, as we said right at the outset, I have a civilian population who are citizen sensors who need our help to get out of a particular area, or I've got a zillion and one drones running around and I don't know the attributes of any of those drones, but they're an information resource.
Yeah.
I have ATM cameras everywhere. I've got cars running around that have 14 million cameras all over them and sensors everywhere.
With no drivers.
With no drivers, yet. All of this is the information space that informs the battle space that is then brought together in a collaborative working environment, needs to be distilled to actually give the people who need it the information advantage to deter the adversary. So it's the scope of the coalition working environment, it's the things you need to reach, the things you need to see, the decisions you need to make, and the speed with which you need to deliver those decisions.
Quick decisions.
Very much so.
Brilliant.
Quick, correct decisions.
Quick, correct decisions. All right, I think we'll leave it there, Flash. Thank you very much for coming on.
Absolute pleasure.
I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future, if people like you.
Absolutely.
With that, we'll close it out. We'll have another Fox Forum first Tuesday of every month. If you have any questions about what we talked about, I'm sure there'll be a link somewhere near where you're watching this, where you can reach out, get in touch with Flash, get in touch with myself, get in touch with the team, and we will try and field your questions as best we can. Thank you very much for watching, listening, and we'll see you next month.